I'm Director of Consumer Education and Awareness for Experian. We are here every Wednesday at 3 o'clock Eastern Time on Credit Chat to talk about lots of different financial issues. Veterans Day is coming, and makes perfect sense that we would be talking to two experts on military finances. So I'm happy to have with us today Alicia Blair of Military Saves and Lacey Langford, the military money expert. And we're here to talk about not only veterans, but active duty personnel and the money issues they have. Before we get started, please tell us more about yourselves, where we can find you and what you do, and start with Alicia.
Thank you, Rod. I appreciate it. Again, my name is Alicia Blair, and I am the Director of Military Saves. We are a nonprofit initiative, part of America Saves, and our goal is to help motivate service members and their families to save money, reduce debt, and to build wealth. And you can find us on militarysaves.org.
Marvelous. And Lacey, good to see you. Tell us more about yourself.
Yes, I'm so excited to be here. So first of all, thank you so much for including me in this great opportunity. I help military service members, veterans, and their spouses to stop being fearful of money and start having control and confidence with it. And I do that through coaching, speaking, and writing. It's something I'm seriously passionate about. I come from a military background. I served, and so did my spouse. Plus, I have a financial expertise. So I kind of meld all that together to help the military community.
Fantastic. And, you know, with Veterans Day coming, I think we all know, and I have the privilege of knowing and working with both of you. So I already have the background, which is fantastic. And, you know, we work with and are passionate about the military and our servicemen and women and veterans. And I think if everybody thinks about it a little bit, we all have veterans in our families or active servicemen and women. So, you know, the first thing I like to say is thank you to our servicemen and women who are in veterans for their service, and to both of you, because I know both of you have served or have spouses who serve or have served. And so we don't recognize our families enough either in the sacrifices they make. So for me, it's an important thing to do. So thank you both for that. So let's jump in. And we have a number of questions, and, you know, I want to really talk about things both from an active duty perspective and a veterans perspective, because I think the issues are a little different for both, but equally important. Some about planning, some about, you know, separating from the service and what you need to do and what you do as a veteran. So question one, are veterans benefits taxable? So do they have to pay taxes on that money they work so hard to earn and save?
Who do you want us to go first?
Whoever talks first in it's my program, and I let anybody talk who wants to. So that's
go ahead, Lacey.
Well, I'm a talker, so I didn't want to force myself on the group. Yes, heck yes, they are. Your military pay is your retirement military pay, but there are some that aren't. So it could go either way. So because there's many benefits that veterans are eligible for. So if you're talking about your survivor benefit plan payments, which are something that in order to keep your retirement pay for your spouse after your death. So those payments aren't going to be included. Things like your education, your VA benefits, those aren't going to be included. And also big one is disability pay that you receive from the VA is not taxable, but definitely your military pay is.
Okay, cool. Alicia, anything?
Absolutely. No, I would just say too that, you know, BAH is not taxed. And I know as a military spouse to an active duty service member, when he's deployed, if he is in a combat zone, then that pay is not taxed. But otherwise, I would say to kind of do your research to kind of find out what is taxed and what isn't. I think it really depends.
Yeah, and that's the answer to everything, right? I tell people about credit all the time. What's the answer? It depends. And acronyms always pop up. BAH, what is that?
Basic allowance for housing.
There you go.
And they also have basic allowance for subsistence, which is for food. And anything that has allowance in it, just the way to remember it, is not taxable.
Right.
Perfect. Yeah. So the other thing we talk about often, you know, from a military perspective is how are military veterans or veterans in our military servicemen and women doing, especially after they retire? Are they struggling relative to the rest of the population? Are they about the same? And if they are struggling, why? And what do we need to do to help? So, Alicia, what do you?
Yeah, so
Okay.
I think that there's the news is actually pretty good. If you look at a study that the FINRA Foundation conducted, I want to say it was a year or two ago now, veterans are actually doing pretty good when compared to their civilian counterparts in many areas. In terms of jobs and income and financial stability in general. So I think overall, the outlook is really good for veterans. And I think that's encouraging for a lot of service members that are looking at getting out and are looking towards a transition for their families. But that's not to say that there aren't challenges. I think getting out of the military, transitioning out of the military is a huge change. It's a huge cultural change. And there's a lot of financial implications for that. And so one thing that I recommend and that our family is doing with a military retirement transition a handful of years out is trying to save as much as possible for that transition to help overcome any gaps in income during that period of time where we're settling down and setting in roots.
Yes, I agree with a lot of that. I think I call it a smack in the face. I put it a little bit more harsh. It is going from active duty military to the civilian world is a culture shock. And I think a lot of people don't give it the proper time and planning that it really needs. But also, I think sometimes military service members become complacent and think, okay, I am in the military. I'm just like set until I want to get out. Well, there are many factors where you could be getting out of the military much quicker than you anticipated. And that could be from a force reduction, which happened just a few years ago to a lot of people. To include my family, my husband was selected in a force reduction 4 years earlier than we anticipated. Also, people that aren't able to meet physical requirements sometimes are put out of the military, or they're reaching their higher tenure where they need to get promoted, or they're going to be put out of the military. And so making sure that, yes, you have a plan for your timetable, but you should also have a fallback position to say, what would our budget look like if we actually had to get out tomorrow? Because a big factor in that is medical care. And that is something that military service members are not accustomed to paying. And that is a real punch in the stomach when they get out and if they haven't retired and are not going to receive medical benefits. So I think on all fronts, they need to be making plans and give themselves time to really think what their life is going to be like after they are out of the military.
That's right. And I would also add to that, Lacey, that looking at what their life is going to be like after the military also goes for the military spouse. Because
Preach, Alicia.
Because they have sacrificed year after year, probably with their own career aspirations and educational aspirations. And looking at that transition is the perfect time to think about what they want to do as their service member is getting out and what their own goals are.
Right, because if both of you decide you want to go to school at the same time, maybe not the best financial decision.
Right. And I appreciate it, Lacey, because you've already been there. We're years out. We're on the final approach, as my husband likes to say. So
yes,
that's a great point.
Well, and that's another thing that's important is thinking about it's not just the service member, it's the spouse, it's the family, everybody's affected because in the military, as an active duty service member, everything is provided for essentially. And when you leave, it suddenly changes everything. And having a spouse, trying to find work for a spouse, I know that can be a challenge while you're in the service. So how do you save and what does that look like? What kinds of, when you exit the military, and Lacey, this may be a better question for you than Alicia, since she's on the final approach, but you've already landed. What kind of challenges did you see, and what kinds of adjustments did you make in terms of career, in terms of planning to exit the military? What kinds of things were there things you missed? Were there things that you were really glad that you thought about?
Well, thankfully, I practice what I preach. So financially, we were ready to withstand that. But a lot of people would not have been able to withstand that. I think my husband had 9 months until he was separated from the military. And that's a lot of time to, if you have a home that you own, to sell, to think about school for your children, a whole new career for your spouse that's in the military, plus your career and what your plans are. So I think that those are some natural things that need to be thought of, but I don't think people give them, especially employment, to find the proper job, but also at the income that you're accustomed to. And a lot of times, unfortunately, that's what's happening is service members with all of their benefits make really good money most of the time. Mm-hmm. I know not everyone, depends on your rank and time in service, but getting out in the civilian world, you're taking away your basic allowance for housing. You're taking away that basic allowance for subsistence. If you're in some combat arms positions or other positions where you're deploying frequently, that money is not taxable. So every year you're making a lot more money. Plus you're not paying, a lot of taxes on it. So those are things that when you separate, that you may not be thinking of, that is going to be a new reality. But also it's the little things like using the commissary, which is a grocery store on post or base. Also the environment that you're in, the support that you receive, little things like getting a free Christmas tree or getting a stipend or some extra money for soccer for your kids. These little perks add up. And when you're now paying the full brunt of that in the civilian world, those are things that maybe that we also didn't account for, those little teeny things, but they do start to add up. But I think for us, the biggest one was the transition, making sure my husband received certifications that he didn't have on active duty, but were required to do that job in the civilian world. That was a big one. So that took some time, and then finding a job that he liked. And one big thing that people don't think of is the time off. The military, if you have an appointment to run to, they're going to let you go do that. In the civilian world, you're going to need to take your vacation time for that. So that, I think, is a shock too for people.
Definitely. And I mean, being a handful of years out, I mean, we're starting to have those conversations now in our family about where do we want to set down roots? And a lot of that really revolves around employment opportunities, healthcare. Where is there a good healthcare network wherever we land? Our location compared to relatives, how close, do we want to be to family? And that's really important to us. And just the community. I mean, I love our Army community. We've met so many wonderful families, and we're tight knit. And the services that are offered on installation, I mean, there are so many things to consider that go into the decision, even beyond the financial aspects of transitioning out of the military.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah.
Well, a lot of times it's more. It's not just the money.
That's right.
Yeah, and it's the support structure around with the relationships you have. Absolutely. And I think you touched on something. I'm completely off script now, which is where I'm more comfortable. You talk about having access to the base too. That's something that civilians don't have when they retire or when they leave the workforce. Military personnel and veterans may still have access to the base, so they may be able to take advantage of other services. Is that true? And how does that affect your planning?
It is true. It depends on your status. So if you're a retired military service member or spouse, and you're going to have an ID card that allows you access to the military installations and benefits such as the commissary, the grocery shopping, or the post exchange where you can get clothes or things you need, also gas stations. And then also too, as a retired service member, you're eligible for services from the financial aid institutions on the military installations, like Air Force Aid Society or Army Emergency Relief, those type of things. Also, too, you can use still Military OneSource then, depending on the time you separate and things like that.
That's right. In addition to personal financial counseling, which is offered on the installation, you can go and receive those support systems in addition to those emergency grants and loans that Lacey was mentioning. Just having access to all of that is really helpful. So when you are thinking about moving, perhaps being near an installation is important to your family, and that's something you kind of need to consider as you're thinking about it long term.
Well, and you're at Fort Bliss, so we're happy to have you stay in Texas when you reached that point.
Yeah.
Since I'm in Dallas. Talking about retirement and investing in retirement, I'm familiar with the TSP, but I also know that the retirement systems are changing in the military too, and the processes. So can we talk a little bit about what the choices are for our servicemen and women in terms of retirement, as well as for our veterans, if they invested in the TSP and what the TSP is. And I've forgotten the acronym now off the top of my head for the new program, but
the blended retirement system.
Blended retirement system, yeah. So talk a little bit about what those are and what they mean for veterans and active duty personnel, and what the choices are in terms of saving for retirement.
Okay.
So
sure. So I think service members do have some choices to make. So service members that came in after January 1 of this year are automatically enrolled into the new blended retirement system, which basically blends the thrift savings plan with a slightly reduced pension, if they were to reach the 20 years. And the thrift savings plan under the BRS does have matching, which is great. It's a great option. It also provides some portability for service members that don't stay the full 20. Another kind of part to that is service members that have been in the military between 1 and 12 years have a decision to make in that window of time, whether they want to stay in the legacy program, which is the traditional pension, 50% of base pay, or opt into the BRS. And they have until December 31st. So the clock is ticking on how they're going to make that decision. So those are some options. Of course, military spouses have all kinds of different options if they also are saving for their own retirement, which I highly recommend. They could do their own individual IRAs and be saving in that capacity. I'm a big advocate of military spouses investing in themselves as well.
I wholeheartedly agree with that statement. If I could give you like a high 10, I would.
Right. Well,
yes, that is so true. Just life changes, and you should always just make sure. Because also, too, people always go to like divorce. Well, this is the military. What happens if the service member is killed in action, and you didn't have a retirement system of your own built up? So it's something to definitely consider, is getting an individual retirement account. But one thing I see when I'm coaching people a lot is I get the question, hey, I'm getting out. What should I do with my TSP? And a lot of people, for some strange reason, think I have to get it out of the TSP. No, you don't. So you can leave it parked right there in the TSP. After you separate or retire from service, you can no longer contribute to the TSP. But that money that you have in there and how it's allocated is still, fingers crossed, going to earn a ton of money. But the TSP is known for being one of the least expensive retirement systems that you can use. It's equivalent to a 401k for a civilian, and it's a great place at low cost. And a lot of times, you can compare the two before, but if you get out and you get a civilian employer with a 401k and you're thinking about rolling over your TSP and your 401k, you should compare the two to see if they have similar options that you're interested in, and what their rates of return are, plus what their expenses. And usually the TSP is going to be, you may be able to earn the same, but the TSP is most likely going to be cheaper. So a lot of times it's just, hey, leave it right where it's at. Don't forget about it, but check back on it. But it is normally going to be good there. But then also a big thing is, don't stop that saving habit just because you got out of the military. Start contributing to your civilian 401k or 403b, whatever they have their options. And if they don't, then you can contribute to an individual retirement account. But it's really important to continue that and to make it automatic, so you continue saving for your retirement.
Absolutely. I think in terms of retirement, you really need to think about paying yourself first and making that part of your monthly budget, that you are going to pay a bill to the Blair household, towards retirement every single month. It's definitely an investment worth making.
Yes, in yourself.
Yep, and that's in your future. So, and it goes back to you have a dual, almost in my mind, almost a dual life. You have the military still behind you and the benefits that brings, but now you have to start thinking like civilians, which is a really weird thing to do, and
Yes.
in many ways. But the whole invest early and often, and same kinds of approaches. So, and take advantage of the same tools. So you can almost, in some ways, double dip.
Yes. I was going to add though real quick. I always tell people when I'm coaching them, when they're not really tracking their divorce, their retirement, is that right now in your earning years, you're earning money for two people, for yourself and for your 80-year-old self. And if you are not spending less than you make and saving not only for the things you need and want, but also for your retirement, you're not covering the rent or putting the food on the table for your 80-year-old self. So it's important to do that right now so that you have a good quality of life in your later years.
Yeah. Absolutely. And boy, I am so glad that my husband took advantage of the TSP way back when he got in. I did not understand at that point, 15 years ago, that the TSP is probably one of the best deals around with the low fees. It's professionally managed, and they have fantastic life cycle funds that you can kind of look at your retirement year. You don't have to think too much about it. You can, kind of set it, don't forget it, but set it and just kind of sit back and let it do its job. It's a really great program. I wish I had it.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I was going to mention too, things that we just discussed earlier is the resources on military installations. Sometimes it's overwhelming to think about the TSP or 401k and the investments that you're going to choose and how much you should give, especially if you don't come from a financial background. And so it can be overwhelming, and that overwhelm will stop people from actually making a decision. But the good thing is there's these free financial resources, financial counselors that can help you on military installations, or Military One Source also has counselors that can help you for free to help. They can't make those decisions for you, but they can educate you so you understand what the TSP is, what the investments are, and have an overall picture to help you make an informed decision.
Yeah. Well, I can't stress that enough. For our active duty members, use the family readiness centers. Take advantage of the opportunities they give and the professional advice. It is free and can help you set up. I know I've talked to you both. I had the honor of doing a tour and doing briefings for our airmen at a number of military bases. And I learned so much as part of that and the resources that are available, and a lot of things that are similar. I mean, you have young kids, it breaks my heart that I'm that old now, but it's like they were. They're not that, I'm not that much older than them, but they're, 19, 20, 22, 23-year-old kids, and, have running multi-million-dollar pieces of equipment. But for the first time in their life, many of them have a steady income for the first time, and everybody wants a piece of it, and they have no idea where to go and what to do. So getting that help and getting that advice is so important. I had a young airman ask me if he could open an account, and I thought he was talking about a credit account. And he was actually talking about a bank account. He just didn't know if he could have a savings account. 19-year-old young man, and his mother was taking his checks and getting Walmart gift cards and sending them to him. So I just had no idea and had no background. And so, always encourage people to take advantage of the resources that are available. So,
right, because they may not understand what a healthy normal with money is. Because some people think it's normal to have your electricity cut off. And that actually is not healthy, for your finances or your mental stability. And so going and maybe you don't know what you don't know, and just setting up an appointment, it's free, and get some advice and hear what they have to say. And if maybe you're not a fan of that financial counselor, good news, most military installations have multiple. So you could go try another one until you find somebody that's a good fit for you, and they can help educate you and mentor you in money so you get to a point where you feel confident or making good decisions with it.
Yeah. And it's so important, because if you don't do that, well, you may not get to retirement.
Yes.
And as you mentioned, you might be asked to find another source of income outside the military.
Right.
And
that's so true.
You made financial mistakes, not because you're not a good soldier. So hugely important. Speaking of exiting the military, and talked a little bit about housing allowances. When you get out, you have to live somewhere, and you get to pay for it. So let's talk about home loans and VA loans, those sorts of things. What is a VA loan? How does it work? What do you have to do, and how can it help you as a veteran?
Okay.
It's like 15 questions there, I know. So pick the one you like.
Okay, well, I can start. A VA loan is basically a guarantee from the Veterans Administration. That's what it is. It's not the actual loan. And I get a lot of people that they don't understand the difference here. So the loan you receive is from a private lender, and it's called a VA loan, but there's different names for loans. You can have an FHA or just a normal home loan. But the VA, the benefits you receive from them is that they are backing this loan from a private lender for the whole amount, a certain amount. And the benefit of that is, one, you might get more favorable interest rates, but also you won't have to pay principal mortgage insurance or put down a down payment on the home. You still have to pay a funding fee. I like to throw that in there because people think it's for free, but no, you still have to pay something. And each time you use your VA loan, that funding fee increases. I like to go ahead and throw that out as well, unless you have disability or, like my husband is a service member, I served. And so we can alternate our VA loans. So, but it basically is backing you and giving you the opportunity to buy a home.
Absolutely. It's a great benefit to enable home ownership, maybe for some folks that would not otherwise be possible, because you're not coming out of pocket for quite as much money as you would have if it was a traditional mortgage. But there are still fees. And I think it's really important to understand that with home ownership, there are expenses that you may not think about. That you do need to think about ahead of time, such as maintenance expenses and taxes and all of that that's wrapped up into home ownership. So at Military Saves, we really encourage thinking through the process first and saving as much as possible ahead of time, so that when those things go in the home, if you need new appliances or a hot water heater, that you have that money available to make those needed changes.
Yes, that's a really good point. Things pop up. We, in the last 2 years, bought a home and did all of the things we were supposed to do to get a home. And then less than a year later, we had a massive infestation of termites, but nobody could see them. They were in the walls. There was no other signs. And then all of a sudden, there was flying termites in my bedroom.
Oh my God.
So that is a problem. So we are going to have to vacate them quickly. And that's a major expense. And it's those things that people don't budget for that will wipe them out financially.
Yeah. Yeah. I'd also recommend too, as we did with our, when we purchased our home with our VA loan, work with a financial institution that you're comfortable with, that's reputable. Where
yes, reputable, please.
Sit down. I prefer, sitting down and having a conversation. There's just a lot of questions. If this is a first time home buying experience, maybe it's a forever home. There are questions that come up that no doubt you're going to need to talk to someone who's responsive, and working with someone on the VA loan and to get your mortgage finalized is very helpful, and it helps to reduce a lot of the stress of home buying.
Yes.
And Alicia, you just used a term that you don't hear outside the military often. It's thinking about a forever home, because you move so often. And I've talked to a number of military personnel who, because you move as your assignments change, they may buy homes where they were stationed previously and have them as rental properties. So would a VA loan apply there? Can you get, I don't know if you know this because I'm off script again. So I don't know if you've researched this. I didn't, and it just occurred to me.
You're testing us, I see.
Yeah, well, I don't know at this point. That's why I'm asking. But it's kind of unique in the military in some ways, is to, to have rental properties, and how do you finance those things? And is it a good idea?
Well, one, I think with rental properties in the military, and just buying a home in general in the military, you have to be financially stable to do that, and also be prepared and be flexible, and have the stomach for that. So buying a home, if you're moving every, sometimes year to 3 years, unless it's a certain market, you're most likely not going to profit from that. And it's going to be a lot of work for no profit.
Or and then even.
right. So yes, or just break even. And then a lot of times people say that, well, I'm just going to go ahead and buy a house and then I'll rent it when I leave. Well, life happens. You have kids, you may be moving a lot, overseas and not able to manage something on the state side. And so you're paying someone to do it, the maintenance and handle problems, take payments. But for the VA loan, I'm not 100% on if you're technically allowed to use it to buy a rental home. But if you had already had the home and you're going to buy another home, there's a percentage wise. And so basically you can't use, if you're using all of the loan on the first home, your loan is not going to be able to use. If you're only using 50% on the first home, then you would be able to use 50% on the next home. So it's a percentage wise.
I'm pretty sure it comes down to intent, right, Lacey? Like if your intent was to purchase your home and you're going to live in it, then that's one thing. But if you're purchasing it as a rental, I don't know that the VA loan.
Right. As an investment property, it's a different,
Yeah.
That would make sense. And it's, I think that's great advice is home ownership is expensive. And you don't know what the market's going to do. You hope it goes up to some degree until you live in Texas. And all of my friends from California start moving here and think my house is worth more than it is. And now I have to pay more taxes. I keep telling them pay so much for your
Stay
house.
away.
Yeah,
Stay away.
go back to California. Actually, no, I love them. It's like my house isn't worth that much. And I don't want to pay that much in taxes.
I'm sorry, Rob, I just want to add one more thing too, is that when people are buying a home, and I see this a lot, people I coach, is that they buy a home that they really want and they're not thinking about the resale value. When you're in the military, you have to think about if you can resell this home.
I'm sorry.
Oh, it's okay. My neighbor's mowing her lawn, so that you might hear that as well. But those are things to consider. If you are living on a golf course, not everybody wants people walking through their backyard or golf balls flying. If the house has a certain layout that you love and it's got a lot of stairs, that might not be great for somebody else that wants a one-level house. So you really have to think about those things before you even sign on the dotted line, the long-term plans for that home, because either way, it's going to affect your finances.
And if you purchase a home and then you have to PCS very quickly, you might not sell or rent that home quickly. So you could end up having to pay a mortgage and pay the rent or a mortgage payment wherever you're moving next. And I've known a lot of our friends that have been in that situation where it is extremely tight for them because they didn't have that kind of planned out in advance. Yeah. So that's definitely something that makes me personally nervous. But we have friends that this is their strategy, that they kind of collect houses and they make it work. But I would say go into that with the
loan. Do you know with the VA loan, is there a minimum credit score that's required or is there no credit score required? What are the challenges there? Another question I'm not sure of. It's a lender's question.
I was going to say, I thought that was a great question for you, Rod, but I wasn't sure. No. Well, people have to remember that it's separate again.
Yeah.
The loan, that's why I try to say the VA loan benefit and the actual VA loan are from two separate places. And so the loan you receive, your credit score depends on the lender. So it's going to vary between lenders, but I think it's normally like 620 for everybody, like somewhere around that ballpark.
At a minimum.
The better, obviously, right? The lower the interest rate, the better the terms, for sure.
Right.
And something else that I've learned kind of, in the last few years is if you're planning on buying a home, it might not be the best idea to go out and purchase a new car or make some other large purchases right before you do that.
Yes.
And I guess I didn't understand that. And, probably the last 3 or 4 years that really kind of clicked for me. That can really impact the credit score temporarily. So keep an eye on that several months out before you get ready to purchase that home.
Yeah. And that's what, when we probably talked together about it is for most mortgage loans, you want a 720 or higher. If it's, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac will specify that. In some cases, the loans like a VA loan may have some different criteria that allow for a lower credit score or some other issues. But Alicia, you're absolutely right. I always warn people, don't furnish the house before you have the house. Get your credit report, know what's in it, know what your credit scores are at least 3 to 6 months out so that you can take steps to address any issues you might have so that you're ready for that application process. And then don't do anything with your credit until you have the keys to the house. People will then say, oh boy, I've qualified and now I can go buy the car. And then you find out they pull your credit report again in that process. And now you have a brand new car, but the garage goes away that you're going to put it in. So, make sure that you're patient through that process and allow time for that to be completed. Always have the keys to the house if you're going to planning a car before you get the keys to the car.
And I say that just because, especially within the military, with all the deployments and everything, it's not uncommon to have that be a deployment savings goal, that you do want to purchase a new car when you return from a deployment, or there is a large purchase that you've been waiting to do or to make. But if the house is on your horizon, then, proceed with caution, I think.
Yep.
Yes. And you also too think about, can you afford the whole thing? You don't want to be house poor. Like, hey, if you can't, get a couch in there, if you can't afford that, then maybe you want to wait a little bit longer and save up some money for the whole, because you don't want to be broke the day you walk into your brand new home.
That's right.
Yeah, and that's a discussion I have often is, what does afford really mean? And it does not mean that the bank will approve a loan for every penny you ask for. You don't have to take every penny they say they will give you. It doesn't mean you can afford it, but
Right.
give it to you. So different issue. You have to plan for the unexpected.
You throw in another wrench there, Rod, real quick. Different installations, the home market in that area, the cost of living, totally different. Fort Drum was totally different than Fort Bliss, Texas. So, if you own a home and you're trying to sell it, and you can't, there's a huge difference. So you could be, sitting on that house and then having a reduction in your basic allowance for housing, and you've somehow got to try to make both ends meet there. And that's stressful.
Yes. Especially on families too, because if you can't sell your home at your current duty station, but the spouse needs to report to the next duty station, then you start living separate lives, which is stressful on a marriage and a family. But also now you are paying for two households.
Right.
And it's a lot, and it stretches people thin. And it means that maybe then if you have kids, then you're waiting till the school year ends to move. And then that means you have to move into an apartment until you get to the next place. So it just becomes a whole hot mess. So really planning. And I think as soon as you find out that you have orders, or there's even like a whiff of orders, you should start getting your house ready to put on the market.
Yeah. And in the civilian world, we don't move every year or 2 years or 3 years. I've been in my house 18 years, and I didn't think that would happen.
That's like a foreign concept to me, Rod.
Right. 9 times in 15 years. So I don't even know that.
So you'll get there, and then you'll realize you have more stuff than you know what to do with.
I have a cheat sheet in my address book with all of our old addresses.
Yeah.
Yes. Have you ever been to the gas station and it asked you to punch in your zip code? And I'm like, what zip code am I right now? I have no idea.
Yes.
So one benefit to having retired from the military, you don't have to do that anymore. So I know where I live, and I remember my zip code usually.
That's awesome.
So another important question. So can you get a VA loan if you have a bankruptcy?
You can, but there's going to be some hoops. There's going to be some hoops.
Some big hoops to jar, little hoops and big jumps to get through. Yeah.
Yes, I'll say what you say. It depends.
Yeah, that's the answer. It depends. And you probably won't get the loan you want, the terms, because the terms would shift if you have a bankruptcy in your credit history. So.
Right. But it's usually going to be a couple of years, because you have to go through that whole process, first of all, depending on which type you file for. So you're looking at like 2 years. And also when you file for bankruptcy, that is going to have this is your area of expertise, but a highly negative effect on your credit score. Yeah. and then that credit score is required then to apply for a loan. So it kind of hits you on
just keeps compounding the issues.
There's some major repairing that needs to happen after a bankruptcy, and I would say it's a wise time to do some repairing, because that bankruptcy indicates that there were major financial cracks in that foundation that need to get filled and fixed before you're probably ready for home ownership.
Right. And I think that's a key point. If people, they always ask me, well, if I declare bankruptcy, how soon can I get credit afterwards? And my response is, you're missing the point. The purpose of bankruptcy isn't to clear your credit history so you can go get more debt. That's what caused the problem in the first place.
Right.
Bankruptcy helps you reset and then learn how to manage your credit better and take the right steps so you don't have that problem. And it will completely tank your credit scores. It won't be good at all. So, and for up to 10 years. So it's a huge issue. So another important thing, as veterans come out, the civilian world's a whole different way of living. What are some tips to avoid veteran scams? Because we know there are a lot of them.
Yes.
And so what are some examples, and how do you prepare yourself to avoid them or prevent them?
So I think scams can happen on a variety of fronts, right? You could have the financial scams, you can have employment scams, you can have housing scams. I like to go general rule of thumb, if it seems too good to be true, it probably is. And to do your homework, ask around. References, are great. There is a military community for a reason. Folks will know who the reputable institutions are to go to for financial assistance and for housing and for employment opportunities. I also like to point out militaryconsumer.gov. It's an excellent website to go to read up on the latest in military specific scams, and that is through the FTC. So definitely check that out.
Yes. I was going to say too, if you're living near your installation, I think every service has a banned list for that installation. So if it's like a local scam, there's going to be a list of people to avoid, and you really should avoid that place. There's also consumer affairs or a consumer affairs department on most military installations that are going to be able to train you on that. They're going to give you classes on home buying, on buying a house, and they're going to tell you how to avoid problems like that. So I think that's important. But I think a benefit that veterans have coming out of the military and avoiding scams, especially if they come electronically, if there's something, hey, click on this, a phishing scheme, they have been trained to help identify those things and to avoid those problems. So I think they should fall back on their training on some of that stuff. And I agree, do your homework. If it's too good to be true, it definitely is. And just because your friend did it and gives you solid advice and they say, hey, 100% this worked for me, don't just take their advice unless they're like Warren Buffett. I might take his,
right?
But I would do your own research and trust your gut, because that's your money. The people that give you the advice aren't going to help you pay your bills or fight the legal battle that can come from that. So make sure that you make an informed decision. And I was going to add too that, banks like USAA, they or Navy Fed or AARP has an article about scams. There are people out there that have done this research and can help give you some tips on it.
Yeah. Be suspect if, you're dealing with super pushy salespeople. If they're promising rate of returns that looks, that are really, really high. If it's super, super easy to get credit and there's no documentation you have to provide, be suspect of that. That is a good time, I think, to be extra cautious.
Yeah. Watch out for the word guarantee. Yes. And we guarantee you have a certain rate of return. They're already on the legal border at that point because it's impossible to do. And I think the advice you gave is probably the same advice, not to put words in Warren Buffett's mouth, but on the same advice. He'd say, don't do something if it sounds too good to be true. It is. If you don't understand it, don't do it.
Yes.
And I think those are two keys. I think too, that our veterans and our military personnel are trained to, as a member of the military, you're trained to rely on each other, and you want to help each other. And there are veteran scams that say, help your fellow veterans or help your fellow military members. And you want to do that because that's what you're trained to do. And that's what you've always done. Be careful about that, because they're playing on the goodness of your heart. And it's a hard thing to question that. But there are ugly people who take advantage of the best in people. And so,
yes, there's a lot of predatory things towards service members. And a lot of times people think, oh, well, it's just the people in the area, businesses that are trying to do this. It's actually predatory family members as well, unfortunately. And the service member or the veteran could be the highest income earner for their extended family. And I've seen it time and time again. Somebody deploys or comes back or gets out, and they have their social security number and apply for things or just take advantage. And so you have free resources as a military service member and a veteran of people they have no skin in the game. They are paid a salary or a fee for what they do by the military or the government, and they are there to give you unbiased, true help. And so you should really just check with people like that to, get a second opinion before you commit to things.
Yeah, absolutely. So to address benefits, rolling back to the families too, and the veterans themselves, where can families and veterans go for financial advice or other kinds of just advice for living in the civilian world and protecting their retirement, protecting their futures?
Sure. So in many cases, again, the benefits on installations, the personal financial managers and counselors are available to family members as well as the service members to assist them in financial education. Military OneSource is another excellent resource there. So I would take advantage of that. Absolutely.
I would add to that there are resources, especially too for the veteran population, but also reserve population that their families might not have access to some of the resources that active duty families are. They can use one I love that I use when I coach reservists is AuntBertha.com. And this is local help. So you put in your zip code and it gives you the resources in that area, whether it be for food, for medical help, like medicine, paying electricity, drug help, alcohol help. There's all of these resources. So you just put in your zip code and you can find it in your area. So I think that is a great resource that a lot of people aren't aware of and don't use. Mm-hmm. Also, depending on the time when you separate, or for active duty, the American Red Cross is another resource. The Veterans Group, the American Legion, they have things that might be able to help family members. And also your bank. They might have some free resources, and also the USA Educational Foundation. They have free stuff all over their website, courses, videos, worksheets to help you work through financial problems.
Yeah. Hugely important, and be proactive. I mean, I think we always talk about that, and if you come to Experian, you can find information about credit reports and credit scores and how to get help with your credit history, all of those things. So, visit Experian.com. I'll put in a pitch for our own site. So
I didn't do it because I assumed you were. I didn't want to double up.
No, I'm perfectly fine. If everybody does, I'm great with that. And it's, to me, that's why we do these things. Experian wants to help people get the help they need, and that's my job. So I'm very lucky to work for a company that lets me do what I do. So. Hugely important. So getting help as veterans, what about our kids? Does the GI Bill, or the veterans, does the GI Bill affect financial aid eligibility when we talk about the cost of college and student loan debt and all of those things that are happening now? How does the GI Bill work, and does it affect your access to financial aid?
I would like to go ahead and preface that financial aid and student loans are not my area of expertise completely 100%, but I do not believe that they affect your financial aid, your ability to apply for it. But I would think that somewhere it's going to raise your income. That would be my opinion on it. But for kids, also the post 9/11 GI Bill, if we're talking about their education being paid for, yes, you can transfer that over. But I'd like to say this, and I'm going to give complete credit to my friend Kate Horrell, who says it all the time, is legislation changes. So you don't know if you are transferring today your GI Bill to a 1-year-old, if that is really going to be available to them when they are 18 years old. So yes, that's a great benefit. Use it, but also have a fallback position.
Absolutely. That's a really great point. They're almost like two separate buckets, I think. And you kind of need to keep them separate.
Yes.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think that planning and saving for education is another really important goal, in addition to, emergency funds and large purchases and home ownership and retirement. That's another goal too, that service members that are currently serving and those that are looking at transition should be planning for. And I know it can be overwhelming. So again, seeing a personal financial manager or counselor on your installation can help you make heads or tails of how to do all this at the same time. Because it really needs to all happen at the same time if you eventually want to get there.
Yes. I will say though that I I think it's really important if that's your choice. So some people, what your choice is for your children's education is personal. So for me, I had to pay my way through college. And so I want my children to have some accountability and ownership in their college education. So they will be paying for a portion of it. So I think knowing what your family goals are is most important in your planning, because if you're not going to pay for it all, then you don't even need to worry about that. Yeah. But also you need to put the air mask on yourself first. If you are not saving for your retirement, you definitely should not be saving for your child's education. I get that question a lot when I have people come in and I say, hey, yes, that should be, like you're saying, Alicia, that should be in your plan and getting it all in line. But right now you actually have to put your money in first before you can start putting their money in.
Definitely.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's the important thing to understand. Is GI Bill is an educational tool that's available to the veteran for them or for their children, potentially other family members. I'm not sure either exactly how it works in that regard, but the cost of education is becoming ridiculous in many ways. So it's one of the tools that's available. But you're right. I know I have a friend in the military or retired from the military who's has two children who went to college. One got the GI Bill, one didn't. Because
yes. That's the other problem that's coming up.
Yeah. Oh, there's more than one of them. Yeah. Yes. And the children tend to do that. There's usually more than one somehow. I don't know how that happens, especially in my household.
Well, I would say that if you are saving for your retirement and you want to also, maybe do the GI Bill, but that maybe you have multiple children, so that's not gonna cover them all, then you should have the same concepts for saving for the things you need and want. Same concept for saving for your retirement goes towards your children's education. So you need to make it automatic, whether that's you are saving automatically into a 529 plan or saving automatically into an education savings account, or if you're using mutual funds or savings bonds, but you need to make that automatic so the money gets saved every month.
Absolutely. And there's some other creative things you can do too to cut the cost of education as you're preparing to go or to send your child into school. Americasaves.org does have a lot of really great resources on education savings, and some of that could be as simple as looking at commuting to school as opposed to spending the money on room and board, looking at doing some of your community college credits and then transferring that so that it's a little less expensive. So there are lots of ways to save. You just have to kind of get creative. And then, of course, working through school as well. But if
I know a lot of people don't think of that, though, Alicia. I don't understand.
Taking your way through and not taking the entire student loan. That's a really important concept. But if education is important in your family, and it's something that you want to contribute to your children, it is something you need to plan on. If it's a goal, then you have to create that roadmap to get there. You can't just expect that, 20 years down the road, you're going to automatically have that money available.
Yes. And that's the challenge, is it's 20 years down the road or 18, and it's hard to think that far out. And that never changes, really, I don't think.
True.
Huge issue. So almost the entire hour already. And so one more question.
Okay.
Any other tips for veterans or active duty personnel who are approaching retirement? How do they plan for it? What can they do? And how can they be prepared? And, how do we help them?
So I guess I would say take advantage of all the free resources that are available to you on your installation leading up to the transition out, whether that be attending all of the transition workshops to get your resume up to snuff, checking in with a personal financial counselor to get your finances in order. Do everything that you possibly can to make that transition as smooth as possible, and give yourself time, because I think a lot of folks think transition is like, okay, 3 to 4 months, done. I'm hearing 3 to 4 years or longer, that it's a period of time that you really need to adjust, not just to the financial aspect, the employment aspect, but to the cultural aspects of being in the civilian world after having served.
I 100% agree that the time thing is major. People aren't giving it the proper amount of time to prepare. And I think you're right. It's like 2 to 3 years. You really need to start tracking what you want to do. And I'm quoting people left and right today, but I don't want to steal this one either. So it's from JJ Montanera from USAA. But yes, but so you probably heard this quote, so don't spoil it. But don't think of your retirement or your separation from the military as the end. That's actually the beginning. Yeah. And so you have to be thinking that way about your planning. So, hey, this is actually where it's kicking off. But I really think it's important to, even though a lot of people don't like to do it, sit down and talk about your hopes and dreams. It sounds silly, but you really have to know what you want, how you want your next career to be, because that is what is happening. You're starting this journey over again. And that means that you might be at low level at this new job versus in the military, you gained all the seniority. So now you're going to be low man on the totem pole. And how does that feel? And how does that translate to home life? Those type of things. Are the spouse going back to school? Are we going to school? Are we retiring and our kids are getting ready to go into college? You need to be tracking all of these life events that could be happening and start planning for that so you can get the money together and budget for it over time, and also to get in the right mindset for that, to be where you want with who you want.
Absolutely.
And make sure that marries up with your spouse as well. I think those are conversations you need to have as a family to make sure that your hopes and dreams are somewhat aligned, so there's not there's not conflict down the road.
Yes,
that's an excellent point, and because it's amazing how if you have the same sort of approach and same goals, how much easier it is. So and that's what I always tell people. My wife and I, she works very hard to keep me in line, and usually does, but we approach everything, I think, from a goal perspective rather than solving a problem that we already have perspective. It's where we want to be. How do we want to get there? Is it a shared goal? And if not, maybe we need a different goal and move forward that way. So hugely important. And one more question for both of you. Tell us one more time where we can find you, what you're working on, and been a fantastic, I can't believe it's been an hour already. It's always great to talk to you. Lacey, where can we find you, and what are you doing right now?
Okay, yes. Well, you can follow me on Twitter, Finance Lacey, or my website, lacey.langford.com. Right now, I am working on just bringing amazing content to my site to help veterans, service members, and their spouses to look at their finances holistically, to save, spend, and make money. Because I've started a business out of the frustration of being a military spouse and not working. So definitely has a hint of that in all of my things. And also you can listen to my podcast, Mill Money Movement Podcast, where I talk about all things that are affecting the military community. And yeah, lacey.langford.com.
Fantastic. Alicia, where can we find you?
You can find us at militarysaves.org or americasaves.org, and we are gearing up for America Military Saves Week, which is coming up February 25th through March 2nd. And that is an annual opportunity for service members and their families to stop and assess their savings status and to really take control. And for our civilian counterparts over on americasaves.org to do the same thing. We have some great content on both of those websites. And I know I just started doing Mill Money Matters. It's a YouTube live series. I was privileged to have Lacey on last month. And today we had the FINRA Foundation with Ms. Shay Cook. We talked all about savings and investing and a little bit about the blended retirement system. So I'd like to invite everyone to join us next month, where we're going to talk about goal setting.
Fantastic. And I'll close out. I'm Rod Griffin, Director of Consumer Education Awareness for Experian. You can find us on Twitter and at our credit chats. I'm on Tuesdays and Thursdays at 1:30 Central, 2:30 Eastern to answer people's questions, and here on Wednesdays to talk about fantastic financial and personal finance issues with experts like both of you. And you can learn more at Experian.com/credit chat. Veterans Day is coming up. Say thank you to a veteran. Without them, we don't have what we have today. So
Amen.
Thank you all so much. And thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, Rod.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Take care.